2015 Aprilia Caponord 1200 ABS review. The 2015 Aprilia Caponord marks the return of the platform after Aprilia sunset the ETV 1000 Caponord in 2007. Instead of borrowing the engine from the V4 range, 2.0 or RS V4, the Caponord gets a 1197cc liquid-cooled V-twin engine similar to that found in the Dorsoduro 1200. Aprilia says the engine and electronics are tuned for more mid-range power, which is aided by including 52mm throttle bodies instead of the 57mm ones found in the Dorso. The Caponord makes a claimed 125 horsepower at 8,250 RPM and 84.6 foot-pounds of torque at 6,800 RPM. Power delivery is modified through 3 riding modes: Sport, Touring, and Rain. I preferred Touring mode most of the time, as it offered full power but smoothed out the delivery slightly. Sport was slightly twitchy, although not so much that it made it unusable, as is the case with many bikes with a sport mode. Rain mode limits the power to 100 horsepower and smooths the power delivery even further. I got the chance to put about 3,000 miles on the Caponord 1200 over the length of the bike loan, which included numerous day trips, a ton of playing in the twisties, and using it for several weeks as my everyday commuter. I actually hadn't done much research on the bike before I picked it up, and for some reason I thought it was the Aprilia version of something like the Moto Guzzi Stelvio, which is more of your typical touring bike. The accidental wheelie I pulled leaving Aprilia's office let me know I was in for a much different experience than I expected. One of the most noticeable characteristics of the Capo is the sound it makes. I get the chance to ride a lot of really nice and really fast bikes, but if I'm honest, I have to admit I tend to mellow out pretty quickly once I see what they can do, unless they have an exhaust note like the Caponord's. That sound made getting on the gas a little too hard and a little too early just never seemed to get old, something I tested at length, strictly for scientific purposes, of course. The biggest highlight for me is that Aprilia found a bike to put this engine in. The Dorsoduro is absolute madness, and is the only bike besides the stock Yamaha FC09 that I thought was simply unsafe for the general public. I feel sort of bad saying so publicly, because I never really want to discourage manufacturers from taking chances on bikes that are super fun, a little nuts, and possibly too much for some people, but the fueling and suspension was just not up to the job of managing all that power. Beautiful engine, but it needed a different package. The Caponord doesn't make best-in-class power, but it also isn't as race-oriented as the competition that might best it on paper. The torque is positively addicting and does a good job at overshadowing some of the bike's negatives. Gear geek John Kraus was out visiting, and we did a ride down to San Diego to get some pie and ride Palomar Mountain. He rode the Capo and I followed on the KTM 1190 Adventure R, and, while I liked the Catum better, there were plenty of times I wished I had that engine and that exhaust note under my butt instead of his. But the cruise control works, but is awkward to set and doesn't allow you to make minor changes to your speed like you can in a car or on the baggers I rode to Washington. You have to hold the button in for a few seconds to turn the system on, and then for about a second to activate, which never feels quite natural since the button is on the throttle side. If traffic changes speed slightly, you have to disengage the system and then re-engage it at the desired speed instead of being able to slightly slow or increase your speed. I have a hard time trying to put my finger on just who the buyer is for the Caponord, which isn't to say it's a bad bike. For the money, the performance is really impressive. The motor is an absolute blast, and I liked it more than the Multistrada until I did some canyon testing. I'm a sucker for the exotics, and the Aprilia wins points for being less common, but in the end I don't see a scenario where I would buy or recommend buying the Caponord over the competition. It's better than the Ducati for touring, not to mention cheaper, but there are certainly other options for touring that cost less and get better fuel economy. It's certainly sexier than the V-Strom 1000, but the Strom costs less and handles its weight a little better in the tight stuff. For my money, the KTM would be the way to go. While not the most powerful, and certainly not the most comfortable, I like its combination of power, suspension, and weight distribution, best. If the Caponord checks all your boxes, I'm not going to tell you it's a bike you shouldn't buy. Probably the biggest problem with the Caponord is how its high-quality competition does so many things just a little better.